Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Business of Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Dave Guttman. If you find this content useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Really excited about my guest today, Connor Darnbrough, who's the co-founder of SmartFit Method. Also, I think previously a competitive mountain biker and snowboarder. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, when I went to your place, I think you'd only been open in your Park City location, a few days, if that?
Yeah, it was within the first couple weeks of opening. We were still soft open, so.
Yeah, it was, and look, I, as someone who was a Division I college wrestler, a competitive age grouper triathlete for about 4 or 5 years, I was blown away. In fact, I had been looking for a place that had the ARX machine somewhere that I could even try it. And then you guys had a whole bunch of equipment I never even heard of before, like the Vesper bike and all that kind of stuff. Maybe start a little bit, about how you got into this in the first place. I know a little bit about your dad being an entrepreneur himself. Like, did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Obviously, you'd been a competitive athlete yourself. Maybe talk a little bit about your journey and how the SmartFit Method even came to be.
Yeah, going back to early days, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think I can remember writing that down when I was like 11 or 12 years old. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew I wanted to be in the health and wellness space from a very young age. It was, what caused that? I'm not sure. Could be, my dad was an entrepreneur, being an athlete, but I knew from a young age I wanted to be in this space. And what happened was I'd kind of left skiing. So I was a competitive skier. I was doing free ride skiing. I had a significant amount of injuries. I'd left skiing and wanted to try something different. So I went out, decided I was going to go to university, went down to SDSU in San Diego. And COVID kind of happened. I wasn't really getting a great academic experience. And I really wanted to pursue business. I was working commercial real estate at the time. I was working a marketing job. I was working for this nonprofit as well. I was just working a bunch and not really paying attention to my academics because I felt like I excelled in business and I felt like I was very poor at academics. Fast forward a couple months, I go home for Thanksgiving. It was Canadian Thanksgiving. I'm Canadian. And
won't hold it against you.
And I go home and it's Thanksgiving. I'm expecting to have, it's just going to be a good family time. But my dad had just been diagnosed with a heart condition that I found out about when I went home.
And just to be clear, your dad was hardcore, super fit, fittest guy in the room. Mm-hmm. You come home for Thanksgiving and all of a sudden he's got something approximating a death sentence.
Yeah. He's sitting on the couch, depressed and very upset. And it's not, it's just wasn't my dad. He was a shell of who he was and I could see it. And it was tough news for the whole family. He had enlarged aortic valve. Doctors told him, hey, for the rest of your life, you can't walk up a hill, you can't lift over 30 pounds. Being into health and fitness myself, I immediately looked to how I was going to help, right? Started looking at the diet, started looking at the training, looking at all these factors of, okay, my dad he's this competitive athlete. He was a national team cyclist for Canada. He was, big, he's super into bodybuilding. He's training bodybuilders when he's 16 years old in World's Gym. And he's got this big, extensive health and fitness background. And now he's not allowed to do anything. And I just looked at that and I started trying to figure out ways around it. So did he. He found this machine called the Vesper, which is a cooling and compression machine. And he did a bunch of tests on himself with a doctor named Jeffrey Gladden out in Dallas, Texas. And they determined that it was safe for him with his heart condition to use. So he started using this machine, got insane results from it, just working out about an hour a week on this Vesper machine. And
well, again, just to go back to how insane his results were, if I remember correctly, he went from being average or below average for someone 50 to being world class. He went I think he got his VO2 max the 61 and a half or something crazy.
Yeah. So his VO2 max was in the 25 to 30 range. Went all the way down when he got after 6 months of doing nothing. It deteriorated. He lost 15 pounds. It was 25 to 30, which is sedentary,
right.
60-year-old basically. It's poor VO2 max for his fitness level and his background. And then, 9 months of training on the Vesper, his VO2 max went up to a 63, which typically when you're doing that type of training or that frequency of training, you don't see. And being into health and fitness myself, I was blown away by those results, and it was kind of an epiphany. There was
And he was just doing 3 20-minute sessions a week.
20-minute sessions a week. And of course, because of his previous training experience and having this thing that he could do safely, he committed to it. But the results were incredible. And I basically saw this and went, okay, there's technology entering the fitness industry that I haven't seen before. And we've been doing it the same way. Like the way I was training people was, barbells and dumbbells and kettlebells and the typical stuff that you see in a gym. And I saw this technology entering and I went, there's got to be a better way to utilize this technology and make it accessible to the general public. Because when I looked for those Vasper machines, the only places I really could find them at the time was, medical facilities or professional sports teams. There wasn't many places at the time that
and the price point on those machines is what, $45,000?
$45,000.
Yeah.
They're extremely expensive. So most people aren't going to buy that for themselves at home. So how do you make that accessible to the general public? That was the epiphany. That was the idea. Went down about a year rabbit hole, researched almost every piece of equipment you can think of, and started looking at how do I combine all this different technology into a method, into a program, right? How do I, based on someone's physiological capability, assign a program, assign an exercise routine, a recovery routine, give them recommendations on their nutrition, their sleep. So I have this holistic program for them that is efficient, that's effective, that utilizes technology. And that was the idea behind SmartFit Method.
So we did skip over a little bit. So competitive skier, competitive mountain biker. Why did you decide to go to college in the first place? Because like you said, it sounds like maybe you were never the guy really drawn to academia broadly. And, your dad being an entrepreneur himself, I'm guessing he probably wasn't like, man, if you don't go to college, you can never amount to anything, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. Why did you even pursue academia at all in the first place?
Yeah, no one in my family has ever gotten a college degree. And there was that there's two things that happened. One, I wanted to reinvent myself. So coming out of a competitive athletic background, skiing, martial arts, mountain biking, knowing that I was not going to be pursuing that anymore, I wanted to kind of go somewhere different. In San Diego, surfing and jiu-jitsu and just kind of hanging out at the beach sounded like a good time. As you probably are too, I grow restless. Like I can't relax for too long before kind of going into the next thing. So I go to San Diego. I'm trying to live that lifestyle of just surfing and hanging out on the beach. And I just, I end up finding myself into job after job after job trying to do something. And I think why I even decided to go to college in the first place was simply like no one in my family had gotten a college degree. And I felt like I always did okay in school. I could kind of BS my way through it. I'd get A's, B's. I had okay GPA. But it wasn't my strong suit. But I felt like, okay, finish what you start, right? I started going to high school. I finished it. Started going to college. I wanted to finish it. But there became a point where I just realized that I am excelling in business and I am mediocre at best in academics.
Right. And
it just became very clear to me. And that's what really caused me to leave and, make that decision. I also, I was going to school and everyone's partying and stuff. Like I wasn't doing the typical college experience. Like I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I was like living in a co-working space because I couldn't do my meetings and work in my dorm room or my college room because I was, people were partying and whatever was happening around me. I was in my suit, in my, we had 3 beds in there and I was trying to like huddle and hide so I could do my Zoom meeting. So I left my dorm room and I slept in a co-working space for months.
Wow.
And that's really when I started creating SmartFit. So.
And was your dad pretty supportive of you leaving school?
Kind of. I think parents naturally want their kids to be protected and to make the right decision. So risks they might take themselves, they wouldn't want their kids to take.
Right.
My dad's risk oriented. That's a big reason why I became an entrepreneur. By the time he was my age, he had started 5 companies.
Right.
And I wanted to be an entrepreneur as well. And I think that I argued a good case, you know. He just wanted to make sure that it was not me running away from difficulty.
It was intentional.
Yeah, but me actually pursuing my passions. And once I explained that to him, I mean, he was fully supportive.
Got it. So your dad has these health issues. You both start going down the rabbit hole. You find some cool tech that didn't even know was out there, even though you'd been athletes yourselves. Yeah. But I know myself too, like, you know, to me, if 2 hours of training was good, 4 hours was better, and 6 hours was better still. And, you know, as I've gotten older, now I've flipped it around. I'm like, well, if I could do it in 2 hours, how do I shrink it to 1 hour? How do I shrink it to a half hour? How did you, because if I remember correctly from some of the research I did, was it your idea to come to your dad with the business plan? Or, and what was that process like? How formal of a process was that?
It was formal. I mean, so my dad giving me a loan to go to college.
Right.
It was, you know,
a loan, he wasn't paying for it. He was giving you a loan.
I signed a loan and there was interest on it to go to college. And,
was it a fair interest rate?
It was, I'll be honest, it was better than what you would get. You know?
Okay.
Like, I definitely got like a good interest rate.
Okay.
For the time.
You got the family and friends.
I got a discount, but it was still a loan. I had interest in. The pitch I went to with my dad was, how do I take this loan that you've given me, you know, which I'm grateful for, of course, but how do I take this loan that you've given me? I want to start a business with it. And my dad's results oriented, and he's not, he's intense and he's tough and he's just very much that way. And I knew that going to him with that proposal, it would have to be solid. I spent at least, I would say 6 months working on that proposal before, like every day before I went to him with it, because I knew it was, so I'm a Canadian. So he was in America at the time. I knew that if I didn't land that deal with my dad, I was going back to Canada, no support, no whatever, and I was just gonna have to make it happen in Canada, Canada's a great country, but has a lot less opportunity than America. I really wanted to stay here. I wanted to build out what was basically a dream company for myself, and I spent a lot of time working on that proposal to give it to my dad. And you know, credit to him, he saw that I was serious about this, and he allowed me to turn that loan into the first location. And that first location ended up doing well, and we expanded from there. But,
so did he know you were working on the proposal for 6 months, or he didn't know till you were done?
He didn't know, because I kind of ambushed him with it. but you know, I came back knowing what I wanted to do, and I had the proposal ready to go. And when I saw him recover with his condition, and that really did light, you know, it really was an epiphany for me. And I went back to school, and that's all I could focus on. I had a super obsessive personality. I was working, but I was also at night just researching this equipment and trying to figure out, how do I combine it? How do I include recovery? How do I focus on the nutrition side? And I came back to him, you know, knowing what he had done. I basically went to him and said, hey, based on what you've learned and what I've seen you go through, can I take this and share this with other people? And he was all for it.
Well, you know, it's funny. I when I went to your new Park City location, you guys did VO2 max, my basal metabolic rate, my body scan. You know, I did I was just blown away by how thorough it was. And again, I've been an athlete my whole life, and I did that. I think I did like 6 reps on the ARX machine. I could barely walk. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and if I read it, like, you guys are compressing what would normally take an hour and a half into like 12 minutes or maybe even less. And same thing on the, because my wife did it with the other Connor in Southern California, your Southern California location. And similar and I did the, I forget the name of the bike where I'm on the Carol bike, but I'm using the oxygen where they're basically increasing the oxygen and then decreasing the oxygen. Mm-hmm. It's like a 20-minute session equivalent to a 90-minute hyperbaric session. I was just like, the tech is so slick and so time efficient. And the difference was, I felt like everything was being measured. And when, you know, you're normally, even if you're with a personal trainer, yeah, maybe you're measuring how many reps you did, but you're not really getting to failure. How much did it evolve from what I experienced, which what you're currently doing now versus what you originally launched with? Like, how big of a journey has that been?
So we've been, I started this 4 years ago, and I call this my MBA. And, running these studios for the last 4 years has kind of been my MBA in business. And it's evolved a ton. But when I first started it, I looked at, okay, why is 80% or 60% of our population failing to get what they need, right? If there's so many fitness programs, so many trainers, so much methodology, what is the actual reason people are not getting results? And I looked at all the factors. I mean, there's accountability, there's consistency, there's discipline, of course. There's also just the efficiencies of the workout, and also how measurable it is. You mentioned, all these data points we tracked when you first came in. A large reason people fail, I think, in their fitness goals and their health goals is because they don't really know where they're at, and their program is not based on those measurables. And that's something that has taken us 4 years to really fine-tune and figure out. When we first started, which I'll go into in a second, but when we first started, it was very much, this is the equipment, right? And this is more efficient equipment. You can get better results in just an hour a week. You still get the foundations of exercise. And what it's evolved into now is a holistic health and fitness program where we do the testing. We recommend an exercise program. We recommend a recovery program. We include nutrition protocols in there. And we really focus on all the pillars of health and fitness that we need to get that person results. Because after 4 years of doing this, that is usually the breakdown. Is someone might start a new workout program that's working for them, but they're not getting enough recovery. Or maybe they don't know the correct sleep hygiene. Or maybe their nutrition doesn't support their exercise routine. So it's how do you take all these factors and make them congruent so that person can get the best results possible. And that's what the last 4 years has really been for us, is figuring out all those different factors, where to provide enough information, where to hold back some information, because you got to make it simple, right? There's so much that you can recommend and say to people, but you have to make it simple and digestible. And that's something, that whole Mark Twain, if I had more time, I'd write a shorter letter. That's something I feel like we've done in the last 4 years, is we've really condensed and simplified that information for people.
So obviously your dad, his progress probably got factored into the original version of the SmartFit method. You've been around for 4 years. Well, by the way, so 4 years, COVID was still going on when you launched.
Yeah.
That couldn't have been good for business.
We launched right in the middle of COVID.
Right.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I was working commercial real estate while I was going to school, before I left school and everything. And we had a vacant spot. COVID obviously shut down a bunch of businesses. So there's all these vacancies coming up. And this one spot came up, and I kind of knew it was going to be a good potential location. I went to my boss and said, hey, I'm starting this concept. I'd really like to have that spot. And just started in there. I knew that COVID was still a factor. At that time, it was like, people were arguing through the vaccines, do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? Do your trainers have to wear a mask? There's kind of all this stuff going on.
The first location was in California, right?
California.
So California, like among the most stringent shutdown stuff too.
It was intense. There was still curfews and stuff. But I just, when everyone is like, I was taught, like, if all the fish are swimming one way into the grizzly's mouth, you swim the other effing way. And all these businesses were shoring up, closing down, trying to just survive. And I thought, this is, if I was to make an impact in that area, this is the time to start. This is when people need it, because everyone else is shutting down or closing up or protecting their own ass. And I just thought, this is when people need it. And this is also the biggest opportunity for us to, create some awareness about our brand and our company and what we're bringing in. And it worked out, I mean, I won't say it was without challenges. It was really tough opening during COVID, but I think it worked out, and it gave a lot of people what they needed during that time.
So who would you say, I would imagine too, 4 years in now, you probably got 2 or 3 like really amazing success stories. I'd love to maybe hear about the 2 or 3, because again, just from what I'd heard from, I can't remember if it was a conversation I had with you or the Connor in California, was that, I think the average increase in strength in 12 months was like 70%. It was something astronomical.
Yep.
But maybe talk about some of the success stories and the 2 or 3 that you think really stand out about what's possible.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, this average increase has been 70% in 1 year on our members. The average VO2 max increase is 19% in 6 months, which is significant. I mean, depending on that person's age, that's 20 to 30% reduction in mortality risk. But the ones that always kind of get me is the stories of, how it's kind of not just the results and the measurables, but how it impacts their life, right? I had a gentleman who came in, who's in his mid-40s, and he had basically at that point just given up on his health. His friends pulled him in. He was kind of forced to go there from his friends. And he was about 40, 50 pounds overweight. He had high blood pressure. He was on diabetes medication. His strength was he had so many imbalances, and he just committed for a year. He said, he's basically, I've given up, but it's kind of a last ditch effort. I'm going to try it. And I took that very seriously because, a lot of people switch between programs, and I knew that if I failed this guy who kind of was giving up, that, it might be not good for him. He wasn't going to age well.
Right.
And, he had insane results. I mean, he lost pretty much all 40 pounds. His VO2 max doubled. He was like... Doubled, yeah.
Wow.
His strength was I think it was 180% improvement. And the thing that stood out to me, though, is that he was able to go and play with his kids again. He was able to go... mountain biking with his son or play football with his buddies, at their tailgate or whatever. It was those types of things that he kind of had lost in his life that he was able to get back. So not only was the measurables he had so impressive, it was also what it actually did for him in his life. And I think that's really important. We always talk about that in the studios is my job is not to make your life about the gym. It's to have the gym or our studios empower your life. And he was a testament to that. I mean, he came in, he was consistent, but we empowered his life.
How about a female example? Do you have one of those?
Yeah. We deal with a lot of menopausal females, and the issue there is typically high cortisol, nervous system's going all over the place, and poor advice, right? They go and they get a lot of poor advice. There's so little research that's been done on females. Most of the studies you look at are done on 25 to 30-year-old males, people out of college. Thankfully, in the last 2 years, we've had some research actually surfacing around, menopausal health for females, et cetera. But very similar. We had a lady who had osteopenia, and she was about 20 pounds overweight.
What age?
This lady was 64.
Okay.
So she was 20 pounds overweight, had osteopenia. Usually, a lot of the females we work with have osteopenia are usually extremely skinny, but she was...
So osteopenia, I'm not familiar with that.
Osteopenia is the precursor to osteoporosis.
Okay.
So she was 20 pounds overweight. She was unhappy. She had low energy. Her cortisol was through the roof, which is part of the reason she was holding on to the weight. And her bone density was super low. She did a DEXA scan it was 9 months after she started the program. And she had essentially come out of osteopenia, which is super rare. Usually you can maintain bone density. It's really hard to actually, at that age, improve bone density.
Wow.
She lost, all 20 pounds. But I think importantly, she'd gained 4 or 5 pounds of lean mass.
In her 60s, that's
and
really hard
improved her
to
bone
do.
density. It's extremely difficult to do. And she bragged to me about being able to put the luggage over her head when she was on an airplane. I have another lady that I don't know her exact age off memory, but she's in her 60s. And she was with her son the other day, and they were walking around, and her son was doing these pull-ups, right? And she's like, I don't even know if I can do a pull-up. And her son was like, hey, you should try, see if you can do it. Keep in mind, we don't do pull-ups in our studio. We do pull-downs through some of the machines we have,
right.
But we don't train pull-ups specifically. She got on, never done pull-up before since she was 20 years old. She hit 6 strict pull-ups.
No way.
Yeah.
In her 60s.
In her 60s. And this lady never done a pull-up like since she was 20 years old.
I bet less than 10% of women could do 1 pull-up.
Yeah.
A woman in her 60s did 6.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but could do 0 when she started SmartFit and does 6 now. My girlfriend, similar situation. She's around my age, 25, and she couldn't do 1 strict pull-up. She could do a kipping pull-up, but she couldn't do 1 strict pull-up 4 years ago when we first kind of started this thing. The other day, she hit 16 like strict clean pull-ups. 16
Whoa.
after 4 years of it, but still 16 pull-ups. Once again,
That
no
would put
training
you in
of
the top
pull-ups.
1% of men at 25.
Yeah, 16 strict pull-ups is insane.
Yeah.
And once again, she doesn't train pull-ups. We don't have a pull-up bar in our studios. Right. It's just from the effectiveness of the strength training that we're doing and the strength to weight ratio improvements that she had. And I think that what allows people to have this success at our studios is that it's a program built for them. You mentioned, we test your metabolic rate, body composition, your grip strength. We look at all these factors and we build a program based on that person. It's not this one size fits all or, hey, I'm a bodybuilder, an athlete, you should do my program to get results. It's really, how do we look at the pillars of exercise and recovery and your data to make sure you have a good program that's going to get you results, and then we reassess it. So that's, I think, the differentiator. And the reason someone can use something like the ARX, which is time under tension, 20-minute workout, and then go out a couple years later and, at 60 years old, hit 6 pull-ups, is because we focus on the foundations of exercise. We look at, improving VO2 max, improving strength to weight ratio, improving grip strength, improving mobility. We're not a way around it or a shortcut through it. We're really just a more efficient, effective way to train.
I always had this sense that I was overtraining all those years. And I always had the sense that, I forget the thing I was reading, but it was saying something like, if you just look at, say, like bench press, right? Like what percentage of the range of motion are you actually maximally taxed? And it's a tiny percentage. And so for the rest of the range of motion, it's either too much or too little, right? And so when I did the RX machine, I was just, again, it's like there's no retreat. The entire eccentric and concentric motion, you're at complete maximal effort.
Yeah.
And it's so intuitive when you see it because it's AI driven, right?
It is. A lot of the machines we utilize have some level of AI or adaptive technology. So ARX has adaptive software built into it. It's not quite AI as we know it today, but it has adaptive technology. What you mentioned there is the strength curve. So if I'm doing a bench press, at my weakest point, I can only lift so much weight. For example purposes, let's say at my weakest point closest to my chest, it's 100 pounds.
Right.
When I get out a little further, it's, let's say, 120 pounds. A little further, 135. I'm going to get a little bit stronger as I get towards the end range of that motion. And then eccentrically, so when I resist that weight back down, I'm going to be able to resist more typically. So if I can push 135 here, let's say, it's 200 as it comes back towards me.
Right.
The ARX is, I think, the best job out of any piece of equipment I've ever seen of adapting to that strength curve. The weight adapts in milliseconds to what you're able to push off your chest all the way out to the end range of the motion, as well as eccentrically. So you're getting proper loading the entire time. Because there's time under tension, one. If you train slow, you're going to get more time under tension. And then also, it's time under true tension. So it's not just how long the actual rep is or if you slow the eccentric down. That's important, but what's probably just as important is making sure that you're actually adequately loaded on the entire range of motion. And you see people try to replicate this with bands and chains and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But there's just nothing quite out there that hits the strength curve as effectively as the ARX, which is why it's one of kind of the core pillars of our strength training program. We also have machines like OxFit, which are a little bit more like performance-based, focusing on balance, mobility, explosive effort, also have some adaptive features and AI in there too. But I think we look at not just what's the best technology period, but what's the best technology for you and your goals. Because there is a lot of machines coming out that are pretty unique, and it's just making sure that we have those accessible to people, and then making sure that it's actually the right machine for that person.
And and those machines are super expensive too, aren't they? Like, because there's two of them, if I remember, right? What are they, like 40 or 50 grand each or something?
I mean, they're 35, 40 grand each.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, like, I'm hoping that there's a smart fit method here in Scottsdale sometime soon, because I'll be all over it. I mean, it's a no-brainer. To me, again, it's like, how do I shrink the amount of time? But if I can shrink the time and also improve the outcome, like, that's nirvana. And that's just, it shouldn't be as hard as it is. But at least as I've seen, there's nobody else doing what you guys are doing. At least if there are, I haven't seen it. Is there? I mean, who's your real competitor? I know Dave Ashley's got Upgrade Labs, but we talked about that. Like, it's not in the same galaxy as what you guys are doing.
We do not. We are definitely disruptive to the market when it comes to that, well thought out guided journey from exercise through recovery to what you do at home and how you sleep, where we're really kind of taking care of every step of the journey. I don't know of anyone who is currently doing the same thing, at least on a multi-location level. But we've been deceptive, I think, for the last 4 years, and we're starting to become disruptive. We will be out here in Arizona soon, and we are going to be opening more locations throughout the country. And I think it's the right time. People are starting to understand the importance of health span and longevity, and understanding that it's not just getting a good workout, but it's also getting a return on your time.
Sure.
I think that's extremely important. And the other thing about what we do is it's measurable, it's effective, it's efficient, gives people a return on time. And I would say, compared to maybe not anything that's similar to us, but you go to a personal trainer, you go to group fitness, we're, I think, affordable for what we offer.
Well, I told you not charging enough. My opinion, you're not charging enough.
Yeah.
So I think you might have fixed that since we talked last.
A little bit, but yeah, I mean, if anyone's listening, like, come in, because we might eventually start charging enough. And I think what we do, that's we made it available to the general public. A lot of people, I think, try to do what we do, whether it's a high touch concierge fitness thing, but they charge an extreme rate for it. And my goal really is to bring this across the country and to touch a lot of people's lives with it. So that will always be kind of my vision. I will, of course, have to make sure that I run an efficient business, but my goal is to improve people's health as much as possible.
Why do you think other people? Because again, when you look at the science, and I feel the same way. Like, I've tried, I think it was ISI and Orange Theory and F45, and then I tried Sweat 440, and Sweat 440 is just way, way better. Mm-hmm. Now, the difference there is it's a little bit more about, kind of community and the energy, and because, the reality is there's no doubt in my mind it's way less efficient than what I would do with you guys. Mm-hmm. With you guys, like, why is there nobody else copying you? I guess is the best way to say it. Like, it strikes me as such a great business model where if you can demonstrate to someone, I'm not pretty sure, I'm not mostly sure, I am positive that if you are consistent, these are the kinds of results you're going to get, and they blow everyone else out of the water, why is nobody else copying you?
I think that it's there's a few factors that go into that. I mean, one, as you mentioned, the equipment's expensive. So it's not something that your typical trainer can just throw up in their garage,
sure.
Right? It's expensive equipment, and it does take a lot of thought to make sure that the protocols are right and that the trainers know how to use it. So there is that. The other thing, I think, is a lot of the fitness industry they kind of chase the shiny object, right?
Yeah.
They train the SEALs, they train the celebrities, they train the athletes. And I think what we've done is we really focus on, you have your group fitness, which is for, people, the younger generation. Then you have your YMCA, which is for, my grandparents.
Right.
We focus on the in-between, they don't want to be slapping chalk, wearing high socks and short shorts and jumping around, but they also don't want to be doing water aerobics at the YMCA. And we focus on that middle, that busy professional. They want something that they can get good results. I mean, also you got to think, they're putting their money into something. They want a quantifiable result. Fitness is one of the only industries where people will put their money in and they don't actually expect like any sort of reporting of their result. If you gave your stockbroker a certain amount of money, you want a quantified return. And in fitness, you go to a gym for months and you work with trainers, and the only real return people will show you is, and usually do it at home, is whether or not you lost weight on a scale.
Right.
My goal is when people come in, I can give them a quantifiable return, and I can give them suggestions for how to improve that return. And that's something you just don't see in the fitness industry. And I think, I don't know why. I think eventually it will catch on, but
Yeah. Hopefully not till you guys have blown it out. Well, so talk a little bit about, because the other thing that, well, I'm curious about this. My sense is by using the Vasper machine, the Vasper bike and the Carol bike and the ARX, that injury would be near impossible. Because one of the things, like I did CrossFit, pretty aggressively for a couple of years there, and I still have nagging injuries from that years later, like over a decade later.
Yep.
So it kind of rued the day I did that. Like, it feels like what you guys do is like really be hard to get injured.
it's extremely safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nothing's impossible, right? But it's extremely safe. I mean, for multiple reasons. One, that adaptive strength curve we were talking about earlier. You're never overloaded or underloaded in that curve. A lot of reasons that people get hurt is as they fatigue, that weight stays the same, right? So I'm doing a set of 10. 5 reps are great. Rep 6, I'm now fatigued. Say I could do 100 pounds, but I can only do 80 now. I'm still trying to push 100 pounds on 6 reps because I got to get to 10.
Right.
And that's where a lot of those injuries occur. With our equipment and the way we train, that weight automatically through the technology will adapt. So I'm not pushing 100 pounds on rep 6. If I can, I'll push 80. And then maybe the next rep I'll push 70. That weight's adapting. So that on the safety side, that's really important. On the performance side, it actually allows me to start with more weight as well, which gets better results and more efficient too. So, that's because of the injuries that I had and the heart disease heart problems my dad had. That was a huge component. Is we got to get people results. It's got to be efficient and effective and utilize technology, but it's also got to be extremely safe because people are coming in with chronic health conditions, injuries. Almost everyone has something going on, and we got to be able to train around that and not worsen it. So a lot of thought went into not just the quality of training for the trainers to make sure people don't get hurt, but also the equipment we utilize.
What about too, like if I remember correctly, because I was surprised by both numbers, that what your blood pressure goes to if you're lifting really heavy weights in the gym, like it shoots up way higher than I realized. And then I think with the ARX, if I remember correctly, it didn't get above like 140 over 70 or something like that for your dad at least.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like that's normal blood pressure for many people.
Yeah. So the blood pressure spike so I powerlifted a decent amount, and your blood pressure spike, if you ever put a cuff on yourself while doing it, is insane, specifically on deadlifts. I mean, squats are pretty rough, bench is pretty rough, but deadlifts, it spikes through the roof. And
Like it spikes to like what?
I mean, it can go up to 300 or 400.
Holy shit.
Like it can go really high.
Right.
With my dad specifically, it was up in those numbers. And it's the reason is you're doing this explosive weight, you're holding your breath. You have to hold your breath to protect your spine, and it also helps you lift that weight up. But you're putting so much thoracic pressure on yourself, and that explosive, you're taking a weight that's stagnant, has inertia, and you're putting that initial force on it to get it off the ground while holding your breath. Blood pressure just goes through the roof. A lot of the strength training that we have in our studios, because we're slowing that range of motion down, the client isn't holding their breath on the whole concentric phase. That blood pressure seems to stay a lot more steady. Of course, if you don't breathe, it could go up, but most people, 99% of people who come in our studio, their blood pressure can be extremely low. We have a ton of people who come in with cardiovascular conditions to our studios so that they can work out in a safe manner, knowing that they're not going to, have a heart attack while they're deadlifting, 400 pounds or something.
So good segue to, did you always also offer the recovery stuff? I know you've got, the cold plunge, infrared sauna, the Lomati's 5-in-1 and all that, at least in some of your locations. So did you always have the recovery stuff, or is that something that got added later?
That's something that's been new. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're just constantly evolving. We started off just in the exercise world. We didn't do the assessments. We just did the exercise on highly efficient equipment. Then we moved into doing the assessments to drive those exercise programs. And now we've kind of hit another phase where we're using those assessments to drive not just your exercise program, but your recovery routine to complement that, and then your nutrition at home. And we'll just continue to expand as, of course, strategically, but we're starting to get into medicine, functional medicine to be specific. We're looking at, massage work, other things that can help complement what we do. Because one of the biggest issues in the health and fitness industry is that everyone has so many differing opinions that people can't stay in a lane and just get the result. There's a different diet. This trainer recommends one diet, the other trainer recommends another. You go to your doctor, they're going to say one thing, your trainer's going to say another. Your PT might say another thing. There's no congruency. So when people start a lifestyle transformation, they're getting so much different feedback that it's hard for them to stay on track. And our goal is to give them, one, feedback and recommendations based on science, and two, make sure it's congruent so that it's all working together. So we're constantly evolving. I'm sure that, in a few years we'll have even more stuff added to what we do. But we try to evolve and then keep it simple so that it's a seamless experience for our customers.
So the next step, it's a couple of questions are just for my own personal benefit, which is what is the protocol you recommend? Because I've heard a bunch of things that if you do cold plunge after you do, especially resistance training, you kind of shut off hypertrophy, which is what you don't want to do. So what do you like? So what is the protocol you recommend for someone in terms of when to do cold plunge before or after working out, when to do infrared sauna, to do it before or after cold plunge? Like what's optimal and why?
Yeah. So your point there is after you strength train, your body has a bunch of inflammation. And that inflammation is a signal for your body to start the anabolic phase, right? So start the anabolic phase and start recovering, repairing that muscular damage. The thing with cold plunging is when people do it right after strength training, it mutes that signal. So your body has less cold exposure naturally reduces inflammation typically. So it will, when you cold plunge right after you work out, you're muting that signal. That's why people say don't cold plunge after you strength train, which I agree with. Most of the research has shown usually for at least 6 hours. To be safe, I usually recommend the next day. I wouldn't cold plunge the same day or recommend a client to cold plunge the same day that they strength train.
Not even before either, so you don't cold plunge. What about cold plunging before?
Before, there's some thoughts behind that because before there's such a high energy and adrenaline and dopamine increase that it could increase performance on the lift. It could also potentially, because your core temperature is lower, it could increase your recovery capacity between lifts.
The Vasper uses technology kind of like that too, right? Yeah.
All I say to people who do it beforehand is just make sure you properly warm up. Of course, let your body heat up naturally, but also move your body after you cold plunge so that you can actually get some blood flow going before you lift. Because, of course, if you're cold and you're stiff and you hit heavy weights, there's a higher risk of injury there. So that's kind of the only thing. Most people with strength training, I will recommend that they do it either later, not typically the same day, usually the next day. And then I think too with cold plunge, there's a lot of research coming out and they're finding that you might not need to be at as of extreme of a temperature to get the same benefits. Most people, to be safe while the science is still coming out, I usually say somewhere between 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit for males. And, try to stick around what the studies have shown, which is around 11 minutes per week. I think there's a ton of benefits to cold exposure if you avoid doing it right after strength training and you stick to around 11 minutes per week. For females, almost all the data now is saying 55 degrees plus for all ages. So for females, it's really important that they're not doing those lower temperatures because of the cortisol spikes, which can really throw off their hormones and have side effects that are not worth the dopamine and norepinephrine increase. So
what about the idea of doing? So you're going to say you're going to lift that day, do cold plunge, then use infrared sauna to then warm up and then do your lift. I mean, have you ever done a protocol like that? Is there a reason why that would be a bad idea?
It wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea, other than a lot of the benefits of cold plunge is tapping into the brown fat by your body warming up naturally. So you might be losing some of the benefits of cold exposure by doing that if you let your body heat up through a sauna or a hot shower before you lift. We really try to do things that are, there's of course the cutting edge of science, right? And then there's where are the peer-reviewed clinical studies, and I try to look at my recommendations being based off of that. There's of course experimentation. You have to have experimentation to kind of break into new frontiers and develop new things. But what we try to do is we look at, okay, here are these things rooted in science. We combine them together and we converge them. We unlock a new potential with that person. There's a lot of data on ARX or VASPER, but now when you put them together, there's a pretty big improvement by converging those two technologies. So cold plunge, if I was to do something to warm up kind of after, I would actually do cold plunge, then red light therapy. There's some data coming out that if you cool your body before doing red light therapy, that it's more effective. It heats the body up. Infrared light typically heats up from the inside out. So I would use that as a way to warm my body up, improve circulation before going into a lift. If people are really trying to stack things in that way.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Well, so let's talk a little bit about what it's like to. So, what are the operating roles? Is your dad operationally involved in the business at all, or is he just been helping some of the financing?
He's like my advisor.
Right.
Yeah. So he's basically my advisor. When I created the method, I looked at it really, how do I help my parents? My mom was going through menopause. My dad was going through a heart condition. So I built out on an exercise front this program to basically help them. My dad, of course, has a lot of business experience, and I constantly go to him for advice. But he's like retired. I mean, he's never really going to be retired. He's always going to be doing something, but he's financially retired, and he doesn't have the desire to be in the day-to-day. That's all me. Yeah. Where I go to, our joke between ourselves is he just stops me from hitting red buttons, So when I feel like doing something crazy and hitting a red button, I go to him and he just kind of helps me figure it out. But in terms of the actual day-to-day of the business and running the executive team and the locations, that's my role.
Interesting. And so if you could go back and, because you're still super young, you're like, what, 25?
Yeah, I'm 24. 24,
yeah, not even 25. If you could go back in a time machine and do a couple things differently, maybe other than not have COVID happen, what are maybe the two or the three lessons learned that, if I go back, I probably would have done that different. Well, what might those be?
Yeah. I think that, if I started with the knowledge I have now, I would definitely start with that recovery intertwined. This is all hindsight, right? But I would have started with a recovery intertwined. The reason is there's a catabolic and anabolic phase. A lot of people put a lot of stress on their body through exercise, but they don't recover properly. They don't give themselves enough time. They don't do the right modalities, and all the benefits typically of the exercise actually happens in the recovery phase. So by not having that, I felt like I wasn't getting as good of results, even though we were still getting insane results. I wasn't getting as good of results as I could have for the members. So I would have done that differently.
How much better, roughly, would you say the results you're getting now that you have recovery as part of it? 20% better, 50% better?
It's about 20%.
Okay,
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I think the strength improvements, the cardiovascular improvements that I'm seeing it's been about a 20% shift in these newer studios that have that because of the increase of recovery. And because we're giving them the right recovery to do on top of their workouts as well.
Interesting.
Yep.
Maybe one other lesson learned thing you do different.
Yeah, I think this is more of an entrepreneurship thing, but I would have let go of certain things earlier for sure. I really, when I first started, it was like I tried to do everything, right? I was the marketer. I was giving, zeros and ones advice to who's now my CTO. I was doing the door-to-door stuff. I was going to businesses. I was doing I was so spread out and doing too much. And I would have trusted the people around me more so that I could have focused more on what my unique ability was and what my skill set is.
So now, my experience is guys that come from, families, a father that was as successful as your dad was, especially as early as he was successful, those kids tend not to have the greatest work ethic. That clearly seems not to have infected you. Where did that come from? Was it just because your dad was such an intense guy, or did you think that's just how you were wired?
Yeah, we just had a rule in my household. I mean, you just don't get what you don't earn. I'm extremely grateful for the way I grew up. My dad, we lived in an awesome area in Canada. We got to travel, did a lot of things that were awesome. But I did not get what I did not earn, right? And that was just a simple rule in my life and the way my dad raised me. And I think it instilled a certain amount of work ethic into me, where I appreciated good things, of course, and I was grateful for what I had. But I also I had to work my ass off,
Yeah.
And that was always kind of, if you're going to do it, that was always his advice with me, is if you're going to do it, just do it right. So don't ever half-ass anything and do it right. And so if I did a sport, if I wanted to compete in martial arts, or I wanted to do this, small business or whatever, it was always just do it right, and he held me to that. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think that there is something like, there's generalities, like, if you come from a successful family or you come from a non-successful family, like in the sense of financial means, there's like the averages and the generalities, but there's also, I think, there's just people who work hard and they have that thing in them,
Yeah.
And I see that with some of my staff. But yeah, I think I've always just had it in me. I've been extremely competitive and obsessive my whole life. And my dad made sure that I never quit on myself or quit on anything I did. And that if I was going to do something, to do it right. And I'm really thankful to him for that, because I do see peers my age who don't have that same determination.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they haven't built that momentum of achieving what they said they were going to over and over and over again. And once you do that a few times, it becomes contagious, and you never want to let that go.
Yeah. So, one of the things that struck me about you when I met you was, hey, here's a guy really young, already had a pretty, nice measure of success. Be pretty easy to have a pretty big ego, maybe even be obnoxious. And again, also seems not to have infected you. Where does that humility come from? Is that something that's conscious of trying to stay grounded and humble and hungry? Or is that something that's, again, sort of just came up through how you were raised?
Yeah, I think how I was raised, I always focus on what's next, right? I have to sometimes remind myself to be thankful for what I've done and what I've achieved, but I can't help myself but to focus on what's next. And I think by being in that state of mind, it doesn't allow me to really think about what I've already achieved or done. I'm so focused on where I'm at and what I can do to improve where I'm at to help other people. The other thing I think when it comes to that is I focus very much on value creation for people. That's where I know that compensation and everything else will come through the value that I create for other people. And whenever I find myself being that way, or maybe getting kind of full of myself, or just being kind of arrogant or ignorant, I just focus on creating value for other people. I figure as long as I'm doing that, it'll keep me grounded. And I think too, like when you focus on the other person, creating value for them, you kind of adapt yourself in a way where you have to be kind of level-headed. You have to, a lot of times in the studio, like I'm a trainer. Like I don't say I'm the co-founder or anything like that, because I know that the value I create for that person is by being their trainer, right? And I think being adaptable in that sense is important. Yeah.
What about because a big part of what you're doing, especially when you've got multiple locations, you have to build a team. And there also needs to be a corporate team of some size, I would assume.
Yep.
And so, what are you looking for in the people that you bring on the team? What are the characteristics that the green flags? Like, yeah, they kind of got to have these, and maybe here are some red flags. If I see these, I'm like, nah, not going to work.
Yeah. I always think that we're in a results economy, right? So what I always look for in people is people who want to be rewarded through the results, meaning that they're not so worried about the time and effort they put into something, but they're worried about the result they create. So we're results focused. So anyone I bring on, I'm looking for that. It could be, I don't know, if I work 80 hours this week, great, but what result did I actually achieve? So when people come in, I'll make sure that they're results focused, not necessarily time and effort focused. Time and effort's just a means to get to the result, right? The other thing I look for with people on my team is just to make sure that they do have that go-giver mindset, that value creation. They're trying to create more value in their every relationship than they receive in compensation. That's something I try to hold myself to, and I try to hold my team to. So we've got to create more value for our clients than they feel they compensate us for. So I look for that in all my employees. And then, we're starting to grow, we're starting to expand, but we're still a startup in many ways. So people who have that kind of startup mindset, right? Maybe they have the experience of working in some bigger companies, but they never really lost that startup mindset and that ability to wear multiple hats and help each other out and just kind of make it happen, a sense of urgency, so to speak. Yeah.
How do you, those three seem like great qualities to look for. How do you evaluate those in the interview process?
Yeah, I mean, I think tools are great. So I use tools such as like Kolbe A Index and the Kolbe Right Fit, which is basically like figuring out people's motives of operations through an assessment. It's kind of like a personality assessment. And then I figure out their motives of operation and if they're a good fit for that role. I think that's important because people tend to hire, and I've done this so many times now, but they tend to hire people who either remind them of themselves or like there's certain traits that person has that kind of reflects them. So if I, for example, put a 25-year-old girl in charge of hiring all my trainers, she's going to hire a bunch of 25-year-old girls. If I put a 40-year-old guy in charge of hiring all the trainers, he's going to by our 40-year-old trainers. So who kind of speak and resemble and act a similar way to him. So what I try to do is, okay, rather than have it go that way, is let's figure out the assessments of what that role really requires. But the clients, I always ask what the check writers want. Like, what do you want out of a trainer? I try to get those assessments to reflect that way. And then I have the right person go through the questions to figure out what that person is. I'm using a trainer as an example there, but that same process works for a CMO or CTO or whoever.
Right.
Yeah.
How about, often being the youngest guy in the room? That's that has to be a bit of a challenge sometimes, I would imagine. I don't know, maybe not.
I'm an old soul, and I view it as a strength. There's weaknesses to it. I have a lack of experience, right? That's something that I've had to overcome is I'm younger than most of the people in the rooms that I'm in. But there's a quality of experience that I have too. And I try to rely on that. And also I think it's good in an older room to have a young person because they'll challenge the ideas, right? They may not have the experience, and sometimes that ignorance is bliss. They'll challenge the ideas of everyone around them because you get so, and I see it with myself, I'm young, but I get set in my path of a certain way of doing things. And I love bringing on a new trainer because sometimes they just go, hey, why do we do that way? Or why don't we just do this instead of that? And that to me is so invaluable because they're just approaching it in a different way. So what I try to do is, one, like not be arrogant. I've achieved something, but I haven't achieved everything yet. So I don't try to give a bunch of advice, but if I see something that maybe I have a different approach on something, I'll bring that up. And that's how I typically interact in those settings. It's not focusing on all the things I don't have in that room that other people do have, but focusing on what maybe I can add and create value in that room that they may not have.
Makes a lot of sense. What about, two of the qualities I look for, and I'm just curious if these factor into your decision making at all, which is I look for curiosity and humility, almost above any other qualities. Because I figure if they're curious, they're going to be a lifelong learner, and I kind of want people in my organization that have that kind of modus operandi. What's your experience about thinking about humility and curiosity, if at all?
Yeah. I mean, humility is super important, right? I think maybe that comes from my martial arts background, but I always felt like, the most humble people that I trained with were usually the best, right? All my coaches or professors in MMA or jiu-jitsu or wrestling or Muay Thai or whatever, they were all extremely humble because they'd all been there, done that. And I think that's a sign of experience.
Getting your ass kicked definitely gives you some humility.
Yeah.
No matter how good you are, someone's kicked your ass at some point.
Yeah. And I think that people need that, they need to kind of have gone through it and had their ass kicked, so to speak. And that's usually a good sign of experience. So I look for that. The curiosity thing, is, it's extremely important. If someone doesn't have the willingness to grow and learn, I think that's such a huge part of the human existence. Why you would stop with what you know currently and not continue to learn, I wouldn't, I don't understand that. And I would say I make similar decisions, not just in who I hire, but in my friendships and relationships. Is a certain level of humility and curiosity is super important.
Well, look, as we look to wrap up here, I can't wait for there to be one of these in Scottsdale so I can use it, so my wife can use it. I think you guys are best in class by galaxies. So where can people find you, find what you're doing, find your locations, and benefit from what you guys are doing? We're up to?
Yeah, I think the best place to go is smartfitmethod.com. You can also go to Smart Fit Method on any social media platform, so YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and find us there. But I really think the best thing to do is go to our website, find a location that's near you. Like I said, we'll hopefully have one here in Scottsdale in the next few months. And book a complimentary session. Come say hi to me or one of my trainers and check out what we do.
Trust me, you won't regret it. Anyway, Connor, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.